So now we've got the DAW structure sorted, we've got all our buses, our output groups, our effects, our mix buses kind of there, we can start to mix the track. This is the sort of stage where you would have your template ready. So your template would kind of look like this. You would have your drum group ready, your bass group, all of your output sections ready, but there would be nothing in here yet. We would then drag our stems in. So one way to start to mix music efficiently with the best results and the least amount of CPU usage is to adopt something called the top-down technique. Now, most people, or a lot of people, the majority of people would mix tracks elements first. So they would go, for instance, into the drums and go the kick drums, listen to that in solo, make the kick drum sound nice. Then they would listen to other elements within the drums and so on, which is still a very, very good way to mix and an excellent way to mix if you're very seasoned at mixing and you understand mixing completely. One way to be able to get this done quickly is to do it completely the opposite way and to start from the mix bus and work your way down, mixing groups and then changing things on an individual level that need to be changed. Now let me explain this mindset. The reason for this is that I want the whole track as a mix to sound good. I don't necessarily want something to sound good in solo. When you release tunes, unless you're releasing stems for remix packs, people don't buy kick drums. They don't buy drums on their own. They buy the track as a whole. So if we listen to the track as a whole from the start of the mix, we're going to get a much better idea of how the track sounds together. If we do things on an individual basis without a full understanding of how we want the track to sound at the end, we can end up spending a lot of time making something sound good in solo, but then having to change that and rectify it later because it doesn't fit with the rest of the mix. If we want to get this done quickly and we want our results to be good results and we want progression in our learning, we can start from the top and start to think about the mindset around why we are mixing this track. We want it to sound good as a whole. We want the drums to sound good with the bass, the vocals and the instruments just as much as good on their own. So how we're going to do this is we're going to start with the mix bus. So we can play our stems, and on our stems we need to make sure that together, without thinking about individual sections, an accumulation or a sum of all of the volumes of the things that within our groups, what does that come out to? So a really good number to look at for mixes is around -6 dBFS, standing for decibels full scale. So if I was to press play now on my track, you will hear all of the sections together. I'm going to go to a section of this track, let's say from here, where hopefully there's quite a lot of information within the track itself. So if we go down to the drop section here, so the last drop or maybe the first drop, this we can see there's quite a lot of information within this track. So we'll play from here and we'll see what the accumulation of all of our tracks comes out to in terms of peak loudness on our main out. So let's have a listen. So we're looking at about -5, -4.9. Now this is still a very good acceptable area, anything between sort of the -6 to up to about -3, depending on the style of music and how dynamic it is. But just to be on the safe side, we're going to pull down our group VCA down by 1 decibel here. This obviously, just as mentioned before, will bring down all of our groups separately relative to where they are set. So now when we press play again, we should be around the -6 area here. Perfect. So as the drop hits in, we're at around -6 at the moment. This is all we're going to do on the mix bus track. We're not doing any kind of equalization or anything yet. We're just getting the levels set. The next thing we can do is move down to the drums, bass, vocals, instruments and so on as groups. So I'm not going to be leveling anything on an individual basis. I'm going to start to level the groups. Okay, so what we can do here, because we've got this VCA set, is get a relative volume for each of the parts and try and mix those together so everything sounds nice together. So let's go through that for a little bit. This again is completely down to you. We could listen to the reference track and get a good idea from that. If we play the reference track, let me just pull this down in volume slightly, and then we'll lift the volume track, we'll lift this track up until we get to the point where we can hear this at -6 to get a good idea for our reference. So let's play the reference in solo. So minus 6.2, that's pretty good. That's kind of close. So now we've got an idea of the balance of the track on as the demo. So let's have a listen again.
Love can take it down.
Okay, cool. Right, let's listen to our track now. So all we have to do now is just mute this one, and then we'll hear all of the other tracks coming through to our mix bus.
Love can take it down.
So we can hear already the drums are lacking slightly, and it's not necessarily the drums that are lacking, but more so the other things are a little bit too loud. A very important thing to think about is if something sounds too quiet, instead of turning it up, turn down the things around it. Headroom is massively important when it comes to mixing, and the more you add is the less headroom you get. The more you take away, obviously the more headroom you get. So from here we're going to bring down the volumes of our groups by another couple of decibels here, and then we're just going to slowly bring the drums up a touch.
Love can take it down.
Bring the vocals up.
You can take me down. I'll take you.
Those chords.
Love can take it down.
I can hear that at the moment there's no saxophone in here. So if we go to our instrument group, so our instrument group here, we can then see once it's opened where our saxophones are. So our saxophones are here and here. So let's bring that in from about here and then see what we get with our saxophone interlude.
Take it down. You can take me down. I'll take you. Love can take it down.
Always referring back to the reference, see what that sounds like where the reference is.
Take it down. You can take me down. I'll take you. Love can take it down. You can take me down. I'll take you.
So now you can hear, it's quite hard to be able to differentiate. Obviously, there's a lot more effects in the demo. We've got no effects here. These are dry stems. But we're trying to get that balance within our group area here to be kind of around the same area. So now we've got a nice bass balance. The drums are nice and popping. The vocals are forward. And those instruments are now getting a little bit more attention, but on slight adjustments. There's no massive adjustments here. The smaller increments we do is the easier it's going to be to find problems later on. Now what you'll find is the more that you mix this track this way, all you're going to do is pinpoint things that need changing. So for instance, in our drum track here, if I just solo the drums for a second, there might be certain elements within those drums that you think, oh, maybe those percussive parts aren't cutting through enough. Now we can go back to those when we listen to it on a whole, we can go back to those individual parts and do the processing to only those, rather than processing everything for the sake of it.
Take it down. I'll take you. Love can take it down.
And then you can see instantly once that change has been done, we drop those groups back down. So we don't necessarily see the individual parts, because then that can be very distracting, and then we can concentrate on individual sounds rather than the sound as a whole.